Obviously, Terry's just spoken about the tariff implications of that, and the product tariff on that will vary according to the product it is. It will also vary according whether it's just a component part as opposed to whether it's a finished article. The other point to make, and I think it refers to the lady's first question as well, is that it's also very important for firms to identify the economic origin of their product, both in terms of the components that come into the final manufacture or assembly, and also the finished article. Otherwise known as rules of origin, that is also another tax that is applied to a good if the economic threshold of that finished product does not meet the criteria set for that product in a trade agreement. So typically in the automotive sector, the rules of origin stipulate roughly 55 to 60% of the product must be of the origin of the country it comes from, or the economic entity that it comes from. At the moment, the UK is part of the EU, so therefore that is part of the EU's overall rules of economic origin calculation. The UK will leave that calculation, and therefore for automotive sector, which probably only has a content of 30% in terms of UK origin or UK economic activity on that vehicle, the likely scenario is that they will pay an additional duty in addition to the tariff for that car to be exported to the EU. The other consideration are non-tariff barriers, and that's one of them, but there could be other non-tariff barriers according to the product you're exporting. If your product requires product verification, so in other words, it needs to show compliance to testing within European regulations, you will need to have that product verified somewhere in the EU to satisfy that requirement in the future. The UK falls out of, or could fall out of, various forms of verification procedures currently applied to it under EU, and therefore that product will not be automatically complied with if manufactured in the UK and tested in the UK. Again, that's another example of a non-tariff barrier which you will have to demonstrate on the good leaving the UK. And the final thing is that for small business in particular, and it has been mentioned, and it also applies to all businesses too, if you are exporting to the EU and to the countries, specific countries in the EU, you will need to be corporately registered in that country. So you will need to set up a legal entity in that country, be VAT registered in that country, and other requirements in terms of receipt of goods, and also the payment of duty, tariffs and other things in that country.